Hello, Danny. Come and play with us.
Oh fuck no, you creepy little twits. Ryan, Daniel. Start the fucking show now. Also, spoiler warning for whatever garbage the guys are discussing.
Welcome to episode 6 of the Horror of Babylon, where we will be covering the Stand 2020 miniseries. I am your host, Ryan, and with me, as always, is Daniel. Say hi, Daniel.
Hi, Daniel.
Well, thank you very much for joining me this evening.
Well, it's always a pleasure.
So we're going to start by getting into just a little bit of history and background on this miniseries. And of course, if you're joining us for the first time and you've never heard of Stephen King's The Stand, this is a miniseries that was based on Stephen King's novel from the 1970s about a apocalyptic flu virus that kills 99.4% of all people. It was adapted as a 4-episode miniseries in 1994, directed by Mick Garris. And diving into the history of this miniseries, it was originally announced as a project in 2011. Now, development hell is a phrase that gets tossed around a lot these days, but this
That seems that seems pretty development-helly.
yeah, this was in development / production for 9 years. It was originally going to be a film, 2 films, directed by David Yates. Do you recognize that name?
Nope.
He did the second half of the Harry Potter movies, so 5 through 8.
Oh, so the good ones.
Yeah, the good ones. And the 2 Fantastic Beasts movies.
I haven't seen those.
They're pretty good. It took me, they're a little bit like a hot tub. I had to sit with them for a while.
Okay.
Because it's just, like you're getting used to the wizarding world without the characters that have been a part of it the entire time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do like them. But anyways, Yates left the project because he felt that the story would not work as a film or even 2 films. He thought,
he ain't wrong.
Yeah. The next director to pick up the project was actually Ben Affleck, who had it for a while and ended up leaving it to be a part of the DC movieverse.
Oh boy.
You can say what you want about that, yay or nay, but whatever.
I'm one of the few in the yay category, but
yeah, I like Ben Affleck, but that's a whole nother conversation. Okay.
That'll be a pre-show next time.
Yeah. Okay, so it originally was going to be 2 films. While Ben Affleck had the project, Warner Brother actually said no, just make 1 movie out of it. Which, can you imagine how terrible it would be as a single film?
It doesn't surprise me that WB said that, because they make some of the only movie studio that I can think of that consistently makes worse calls is Sony.
Yeah.
And I don't know. They frustrate me as a production company.
Mm-hmm. Well, eventually in 2014, the project came to Josh Boone, who was one of the showrunners for what we eventually got. He wanted to originally do 4 films.
Yeah.
Which 4 films, I think, would have been enough to cover the source material, but breaking up the story into 4 movies sounds awkward. I think 3 would have been...
3 would have been the sweet spot, because then you could have done, the 3 books.
Right.
But I don't know if they're... I mean, there's a good, bookend in book 2, where, Harold blows up the committee.
Right.
That's a good spot to end a movie.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if there's, enough stuff going on in the middle and the beginning of that book.
Right. Well, Warner Brothers in what I feel is a good decision by Warner Brothers. They said, no, you're not doing 4 movies, but would you like to do a miniseries?
Yeah, okay, see, that's a good call.
Fast forward 3 years later, 2017, at that point they were discussing doing a full series with multiple seasons as opposed to doing a miniseries. a lot of the feedback I've heard from other podcasters and reading articles, they're saying we wanted a full series with multiple seasons. I'm on the other end of that, and I don't think that would have held my attention long enough.
My feelings are super mixed after watching this. Hearing it, like, at first I would have been like, no, just give us a miniseries. And then I see some, like, before we actually start watching it, I'm like, maybe there's some other stuff you could cover. You could, like, maybe do more, like, have you seen Castle Rock?
No, not yet.
Okay, you could do, like, a Castle Rock thing where you start to go into, like, other Stephen King lore and tie it together.
Right.
But then I watched the miniseries, and I'm like, okay, I don't really want any more of this. So
yeah, I mean, that's if you'd made a full TV series, yes, we could cover everything from the book we want.
Yeah.
We could flesh out the characters really well. We could tie into other Stephen King properties. But do you really want to watch Stu and Larry and Fran for 3 seasons?
No,
I don't.
Maybe Harold.
Yeah, maybe Harold. Okay, so, and then of course, they settled on a miniseries. There'd be 9 episodes that would release in 2020. It was actually supposed to release on CBS All Access either first or second quarter of 2020, and was, in another good decision, pushed back because of the coronavirus.
I think that was the right decision from, like, a sensitivity standpoint.
Right.
But from, like, a purely marketing standpoint, I would have been like, hey guys, this is what could happen. You should watch it.
And also, a lot of people watched a ton of TV the first half of 2020.
Yeah, like, they would have gotten the numbers way up.
For sure. And just some fun notes here. Josh Boone wanted Christian Bale to play Randall Flagg.
I would have loved to see that.
I would like to see that. And he wanted Matthew McConaughey to play Stu, who played Randall Flagg in the Dark Tower movie.
Okay. Huh.
And then, of course, there were rumors for years that Marilyn Manson was going to be in it. He said in an interview he has been cast in The Stand in an undisclosed role. Most people were thinking that he was going to be Trash Can Man. Of course, it ended up not being him, but...
The rumor that I read was that he was going to be the kid.
I had heard that too, but I never got a story as to why he wasn't involved.
Was it around the time that he got canceled?
Yeah, that may have been it.
Because there's a Marilyn Manson, king of controversy. The one thing you really can't survive these days is a sex scandal.
Yeah, that's for sure. I don't know. Ezra Miller has been doing okay, and there's a video on YouTube of him grabbing a woman by the throat and throwing her on the ground.
Yeah, but he didn't molest her.
He didn't have sex right there. That we saw.
Yeah.
Okay, so first thing we're going to get into is the structure. And this is a very important segment for this episode because the first thing you find out about this miniseries is they radically changed the structure of the story as opposed to the book and the original miniseries. So first, Daniel, tell me how is the structure different? How's the structure work? And then we'll talk about if it's effective, if it was a good idea.
Okay, so what they do is the first shot in the show is of a cornfield, and I'm like, that's fine. We're sitting there, we're watching it, and you're getting a little Mother Abigail exposition, and then it cuts to a scene that happens like midway through book 2. That's like halfway through the book.
The church.
Yeah, they're showing you. So they'll show you stuff from Boulder, and then they'll flash back. And then sometimes there'll be flashbacks in those flashbacks, and then flashback forwards. So it's a lot of going back and forth. It's, hey, here's where your characters are now, and here's where they came from. Which, if I had not been, like, living and breathing The Stand since October, I would have had no idea what was going on. I would have been so lost.
I really wish that we would have had a third person with us watching who had not read the book so we could get their take on this miniseries.
But I was getting lost, and I've read the book.
Right. And I liked it in that I was seeing something new and not just the fourth rehashing of a story that we read the book, read the comics, watched the original miniseries. So I liked that I didn't know what exactly was going to happen.
Yeah.
But it was confusing.
It was very confusing, and it was doing this thing where it was relying on people having previous knowledge of the source material, while also not wanting them to like pay too close attention to the source material.
Right.
It was that happened. I think that was. I have a similar opinion of the second It movie, where it wants you to know some of the stuff from the book, but don't get mad when we change stuff.
Don't ask me not to get mad about it in chapter 2.
Yeah, I'm not asking you that, but I feel like that's what the director and the
words
studio...
came out of your mouth.
And I got the same feeling when I was watching this. Like, they want us to have the instruction manual, but then don't want us to point out when they make other changes.
There were parts where it was effective, like the first episode as a whole.
If it would have,
I thought was great.
I think if they would have only done that for the first episode, it would have been fine. It would have been different. It would have gotten you on board. But then they keep doing it.
So what, after seeing the first episode, where it's basically mainly focused on Harold and Fran, and then Stu's in there a little bit, but mainly for exposition.
Yeah.
I thought what we were going to get was like each of the first like 4 to 5 episodes.
We're going to be other characters.
Yeah, like, okay, the next one is going to be Larry, and the next one is going to be Nick, and so on and so forth. And it's going to take 4 or 5 episodes to establish all the main characters and get them to Boulder. And then from Boulder, we would just move forward with the story like normal. But what actually happened is like all the different characters' stories mix across multiple episodes, and you're jumping all over the place.
It was very... I don't know if schizophrenic is the right term, but it was very... It was just confusing.
It was extremely obvious that there were 4 to 5 writers, which there were.
This just might be me. Like, I do appreciate that they tried something new, but at the same time, they were making so many changes that I knew that they were trying to reach a wider audience than just the 30-year-olds that read Stephen King like us. But then you're sitting there, and I'm like, well, just from a purely structural issue, I believe, and this is why, you're right, we should have had someone else watching this with us.
Right.
But we didn't know. But I can't imagine trying to get attached to these characters when it's structured this way. I feel like that would have been super hard. It would have been hard to be worried about the drama, because they already show you all the characters are fine.
If I had this to do again, we would have at least one other person with us who had not read the book, preferably had not seen the original miniseries, and we would have done episode by episode coverage.
Yeah.
And just be like, okay, we're going to talk about the book a little bit, but now we're going to throw it to you. Tell us what the hell you think is going on.
Explain to us the plot.
Yeah.
And tell us where you think it's going to go.
But we will definitely keep that
in mind
for future things, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move into characters, which will be the meat of our conversation. I have a list of 18 characters here.
Oh boy.
They're not all going to get equal time,
Yeah.
obviously. When we were covering the book in the original miniseries, we always started the character section with Stu Redman, but we're not doing that here. This series was the story of our friend Harold. So we are going to start with Mr. Harold Lauder, played by Owen Teague, which you may know from other King properties such as It and Cell.
Yeah.
And of course you're Harold's #1 fan, so I'll let you kick it off.
I think this guy did a fantastic job. While I have problems with the structure of the series, everything that this dude did as Harold, I feel was gold. He played that awkward nerd who didn't know how to talk to people very well, who leaned more on they had him lean more on the creepy side and not so much the misunderstood artist side. I loved that he would look at Franny through a peephole. When he touched himself to a picture of her, I was like, that's disturbing, but that's something that kind of person with that obsessive personality would do.
It's something that happens, yeah.
And it got to show you that sort of the term gets flung around a lot. It got to give you that nice little incel vibe,
Right.
you know. And I believe you told me that you heard some people weren't a fan of his acting, and I was flabbergasted. I thought he did a fantastic job.
I like to listen to a lot of podcasts and read a lot of reviews and stuff. Not normally, actually, but just for our coverage purposes. The vast majority of people were singing praise for Owen Teague, but I did stumble across one review that said his performance was the worst in the entire show.
The way it was structured, even, I believe you and I were talking about this, it almost seemed like a Harold TV show.
Yeah.
Like they could have, with a few rewrites, told this almost entirely from his perspective, and it would have been like a psychological thriller.
Yes, it was very much framed as if he was the main character, to the point where we were even thinking, is he going to die?
Yeah,
on the road? Is he going to make it to Vegas?
And I feel so dumb for forgetting his friend's name. Man.
Nadine?
No, the dude.
Teddy Wyzak.
Thank you, Teddy. I love they established like that whole him as Hawk more.
Yeah, Hawk.
And that whole, is he going to be actually fall to the dark side, or is he going to like learn that he can have a fresh start and make all these friends? And the dude who played Teddy did a good job, and he was just similar enough to Harold's personality of being like a little bit of a creeper, but pulled back enough. Man, when Teddy pulled out the DVD and goes, "Do you think The Rock lived? He could have lived." That was the best scene in the whole miniseries.
It was up there. Teddy was played by Eon Bailey, who had a really small role, but really shined whenever he was on screen. He was talking about taking Blu-rays from people's houses to set up a drive-in.
And I really feel that this is one of the things I will give the miniseries. When I'm like trying to describe why I like Harold so much as a character, I feel like this miniseries showed that very well, of that like potential that he could have been different, save a few choices.
So, if I had to summarize my feelings on this miniseries, I would probably say there's a lot to love, and there's a lot not to love.
Yeah.
If I had to give you my favorite thing from this miniseries, it would definitely be Owen Teague as Harold. I never disliked Harold as a character, but I hadn't found the same attachment to him that you did while reading the book.
Yeah.
And I definitely didn't care about him in the original miniseries. But I'm walking out of this show thinking, wow, Harold is probably the best character in this book.
I think they should give this actor more roles. I think that he definitely, I don't know if like telling an actor that he plays a creeper very well is flattering, but dude, I just say get typecast. you can do it.
Well, he was Patrick Hockstetter.
I would have killed for an actual Patrick Hockstetter.
I'm sure we'll get a third It adaptation 20, 30 years down the road.
Maybe by then I can have the actual Patrick Hockstetter that murdered his little brother in his sleep and
gave Henry Bowers the most awkward
hand job.
Garbage dump hand job. I'll put it in my mouth if you want me to, Henry.
Next time.
What? Okay. So Harold was great. We'll be talking more about Harold in reference to the other characters, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And just real quick, he was played in the original miniseries by Corin Nemec. How do you feel like Owen Teague's performance compared to Corin Nemec's performance?
I honestly really liked both of them. I prefer Teague's.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I'd call them a great margins. I felt like they were both doing that role very well for how people are picturing that type of person at those periods of time.
I had trouble taking Corin Nemec in the original seriously with just like the way they dressed him and the way he talked and those god-awful fake zits. And
I really did like in this new one, they showed him practicing the smiling with
Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise picture. That was great.
Right. All right. So moving on, I feel like since we started with Harold, it's only logical to go to Fran next. So Fran was a character that we both really loved in book one, And then, of course, her role really changes or diminishes in book 2 and then basically disappears altogether in book 3.
Yeah.
That doesn't really change in the original miniseries. What are your impressions of Fran now that you've seen the new show?
My opinion of Fran really hasn't changed across the board. I feel she had the most potential as a character in the book, and everything sort of drops off. It didn't really change in this. They gave her a little bit more screen time, but...
So, do you feel that the new coda, the 9th episode that Stephen King wrote specifically for this miniseries, do you feel like that added to her character?
No, I mean, what all did we learn? She sees the... Spoilers. She sees the ghost of Mother Abigail, and Mother Abigail's like, oh yeah, you're going to have a lot of kids, and your kids will have a lot of kids. Congratulations. And I'm like, I don't even think that's a wrong path for a person to take, especially in a post-apocalyptic world.
Right.
But she still barely did anything. I did like that that King added an interaction with Flag, because that was really missing in the original book.
Yes.
That was missing in the miniseries adaptation. I feel like that part was fine. King saw a mistake he made and went, how can I retrofit this without drastically altering the entire story? And you give her a temptation, and that was fine. I liked that, but I still felt it was too little too late.
I actually have a lot to say about that, but we're going to save that for the religion section.
Okay.
So Fran herself, the character, doesn't get like an expanded role in this miniseries, which I kind of felt like was a miss, because that's one of my main complaints from the book. So if I were writing a new adaptation, giving Fran a larger role in the second half of the story is something I would have probably prioritized. But leaving that aside, because it didn't happen, so let's not dwell on it. But looking at the performance, okay, so we had Molly Ringwald in the original, and now we have Odessa Young. I thought Odessa Young really kind of killed it.
In terms of acting, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she did great with what she had. Just, if you're playing a character I don't care about, she did her best, is all I can say.
Right.
She was believable as that character.
I think the actor really succeeded where the writing was really failing the character.
Yeah.
The moment where I don't want to say I gave up on Fran, but I gave up on them doing anything new or different with Fran, was the scene in the basement where Harold catches her.
Yeah.
And she starts talking to him and saying, I know you, Harold. You're my last connection to the old world. And I was convinced she was lying to him to get him to let his guard down so she could kick him in the nads.
And then just bolt. Yeah.
But no, she was being genuine.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a huge miss.
It was... Another huge miss was when Harold had those nanny cams and didn't just masturbate.
Yeah.
But
I mean, how many times do we really need to see Harold jerking it?
at least 3 times.
But I mean, they didn't even have to have her, successfully overtake him. But if she
Just
would
try
to fight him, and then
Yeah.
he knocks her down and locks her in, and the story progresses as it was. But at least, I don't know. I'm sure we'll get a 3rd adaptation of The Stand in 40 years, and I'll be disappointed with Fran again.
Yeah.
Not to the fault of Fran, but to the fault of Stephen King and the other writers. Not that I don't love you. Okay, so let's go to another bright spot for me. Larry Underwood, played by Jovan Adepo.
Fantastic.
Yes, I loved this adaptation of Larry. Definitely preferred it to the performance in the original miniseries.
Where he's played like a greaser.
Yeah, I remember when we covered the 94 miniseries, we were talking a lot about how Larry just was like too over the top, and he just felt like, the word I kept throwing around was greaseball. He was played by Adam Stork.
Yeah.
But this Larry was exactly how I pictured him in the book. Just like a cool guy that has problems and he's struggling, with how, with his role in the world, and if he's a selfish person or if he's not a selfish person.
And we got to see a decent amount of that.
Yeah.
I do think there was one small fumble, and it wasn't by fault of the actor or by fault of... It was another one of those writing issues where they make a small change, and they wanted us to condemn Larry for it, but it had me when he was in the sewer.
Yeah.
In this miniseries, they do them going through a sewer instead of going through the Lincoln Tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
And well, what happens is that a guy offers Larry $1 million to bang Rita.
Mm-hmm.
Larry says, no, go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
In the book, that was the end of the conversation. In this miniseries, him and Rita get chased by 3 dudes with guns,
yep.
obviously with the intention of killing him and raping her, and they go hide in the sewer.
Right.
Rita walks in the sewer for like 30 seconds and decides to go back up.
Yeah.
And Larry's like, no, I'm not going back up there. There's 3 dudes with... One has a shotgun, one has an AR-15. I have a pistol. And like, what are we going to do? And she goes back up. In the original book, I thought he lost his temper with her far too easily when he wasn't as prepared as he should have been either.
Right.
And this, I'm sitting there like, yeah, bitch, stay in the sewer.
In the book, she wears like heels or something,
and
cuts her foot up, and he loses it on her.
And granted, that was dumb of her to do, but he shouldn't have lost it like he did.
Yeah.
And you get to see that part of Larry that's not such a nice guy. And then he gets to the tunnel and finds, oh, I didn't bring a flashlight. I wasn't prepared either.
He tells her in the book, have fun getting raped and murdered.
Yeah.
Which is not a nice guy thing to say, Larry.
And in this, he's literally going, if you go back up there, you're probably going to get raped and murdered.
Which is just the truth.
Which was just what would have happened.
But she doesn't.
She doesn't. And what happens is she went the direction he said to go, and, oh, look, he was right.
Yeah.
That's the only fumble I thought there was in this series, because the show, I think it was clear that the show wanted me to condemn him for not going with her.
Right.
Where he was just literally doing the smartest possible thing given their circumstance.
Right, but I like the change from the sewer to the tunnel in terms of like the scary aspect of it. When you literally can't fill a whole tunnel full of bodies and you're trying to think, how can we adapt this sort of same creepy thing? And they have his mom's body float up and rats are crawling out of her mouth. I'm like, when you need to get the same kind of effect on a smaller scale, whoever wrote that scene did a good job. Right, but I agree with you how they get to the sewer and everything with Rita.
And that's like, honestly, that's the only real fumble I can think of for Larry. I think the actor did a good job. I did make a joke when we, because, what was it? We were like 7 episodes in, and we were like, man, we haven't heard Baby Can I Dig Your Man, and I was getting frustrated. And then they finally play it. I think it was 7 or 8.
It's a loss. I think it's in the episode 8, the one where the bong goes off, because they bring them into the casino and it's playing.
Yeah.
Like specifically to mock Larry.
And then we listen to the song, and I'm sitting there going, you know what, Ryan? It's sort of funny. In the original book, Larry was a white guy who was known for sounding black. And we're sitting there listening to this version of Baby Can I Dig Your Man, and it sounds like the whitest music I have ever heard.
I love this theme with Stephen King. I don't know if you remember, but in It, all the kids argue about which artists are black and which ones are white. Like, they get in an argument about if Little Richard is black or white.
Oh my god.
Which just sounds so absurd to us. But
when you don't have Google at your fingertips all the time,
they literally have only heard Little Richard on the radio. They have no idea.
Yeah. And they even kind of dress him like a country star in his posters and stuff in this.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there going, is he supposed to be like a black country rock star? Is that like the switch they made? Maybe I'm overanalyzing it, but I thought that was funny.
Another thing on Larry is they really did a good job with his relationship with Joe.
Yeah.
And in our coverage of the first miniseries, we said Joe is probably something you could cut and it wouldn't matter that much. But now seeing that story adapted well...
Seeing that done well.
Yeah, it's really important. It really helps you appreciate Larry, and there's empathy that the audience gets about Larry there by seeing how he treats Joe.
And I also believe you brought it up when I got here, how we talked about how you could easily, you could cut Lucy.
Yeah.
And then this, spoilers, this miniseries doesn't have Lucy. And sorta. She's not with Larry.
Yeah.
And we're sitting there going, man, him having Lucy really kind of humanized him.
Also, so bringing Nadine into it for a minute, the scene in this miniseries where Nadine comes to him and is like, fuck me, Larry, he's just basically, it's a lot less believable that he tells her no, because in all the other adaptations, he has Lucy, and that's why he says
it's
no.
great, like he's in love with Nadine, he's also in love with Lucy. It's one of those classic love triangle sort of things.
But in this one, why does he tell Nadine no?
Because he has to break into Harold's house, and that couldn't possibly be done another night.
Yeah. I don't know. All right, well, we'll talk more about that when we get to Nadine. So, yeah, Larry was good. So moving on to Stu Redman, who is played by James Marsden. And so I like Stu, but again, I don't feel like there's a ton to say. James Marsden did a good job.
Yeah, he did the role.
They adapted They adapted Stu well. I mean,
yeah, I like that they added more interactions with one of the doctors, and that kind of gave him more. Because when you're cutting so much of like the Arnett scenes, how do you humanize Stu? Well, you have him have his doctor friend.
A friendly doctor, yeah.
I would have probably preferred them having like Arnett scenes.
Mm-hmm.
I think that probably would have been better.
They just had the one where they're drinking beer at the gas station.
Yeah. I probably would have done more with that. But if you're going to make a change, that wasn't bad. That's not a change to Stu. That's just a change to how they chose to humanize him.
Like I said earlier, his flashbacks were really more about exposition.
Yeah.
There was a lot of explaining what Captain Trips is, where it came from, how it got out, how it escalated.
And I think that's fine for people who have, we already brought this up, people who have seen or read the book.
Right.
But I thought it was a little clunky doing it for a general audience. I'm sitting there watching it going, man, it would have been really cool to see a lot of that.
Yeah. So something that was added for this miniseries was Stu's interactions with General Starkey, played by J. Jonah Jameson, a.k.a. J.K. Simmons.
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't bad.
I thought it was a little weird that he shot himself in the chest in front of Stu.
Yeah, like, wait for me to leave the room.
Yeah.
But... Because I didn't think we were going to get General Starkey at all.
No.
But then we got him, and I always say this, you can't expect a one-for-one adaptation. Some things have to be different.
Right.
Books, you can have a lot of internal dialogue or thought processes. You can't really portray that well in movies. And sometimes you have to condense information.
Right.
And if you're going to condense stuff, just put the general where Stu is, and you can have him talk about the poetry and stuff. That was fine.
So, something that I liked but didn't like, I felt like his relationship with Fran was a little more developed and believable in this one, as opposed to the original miniseries. But I did think the age difference was a little weird. And yes, maybe I'm coming at that with 2021 sensibilities. Odessa Young literally looks like she could play a 17-year-old girl.
How old was she in the book? Like 19, and how old was Stu? Because I know that there was an age difference, I just don't remember how pronounced it was.
I'm going to Google her.
We're Googling this now. I mean, I see what you're saying, because I don't know the age differences for the actors, but it's like when someone says Jesse Eisenberg is too young when he's like 30-something, but it's because he looks 12.
Yeah.
This character looked like she was 16, 17 years old.
And James Marsden looks really good, but he's definitely looks over 40.
Yeah. I remember that Franny was in college, but I don't remember. I think she was like 19 or 20.
I want to say she was very early 20s, if not younger.
Yeah.
Oh.
Whoa.
Whoa.
I still think Mike Judge would have been a great Stu Redman.
Yeah. Dead Man Wonderland at Wiki. That's a great show. That's something we could cover.
Because I know that he was old enough, because he had been married before.
How old is Stu Redman? 30. Okay, Stu is 30. How old is Fran Goldsmith? 21.
Okay, so it's about the same age difference between me and my girlfriends.
Yeah, I mean, 9 years is not a big deal. And even more so after the apocalypse. Like,
Yeah.
if you're consenting adults, who cares after the apocalypse?
But I see what you're saying. It looked more pronounced.
Yeah, it was a little weird.
It definitely looked like it could have been an adaptation of Lolita. I was trying to remember the main character's name from that, but I can't. I feel dumb. I've read that book like 3 times.
And I just read it like 3 or 4 months ago. Humbert, of course.
Yeah, I knew it was something dumb.
Played by Jeremy Irons. Okay. Alright, so yeah, Stu was good. The latter half of the book, or of the miniseries, it's really kind of a one-for-one adaptation. They go for the walk. He takes the fall. Larry says, "We're not leaving you behind." "Yes, you're leaving me behind."
Yeah.
Kojak takes care of him. Tom finds him. They do this new coda written by Stephen King, and Stu is in it, but it really focuses more on Fran.
Yeah, he's more of a catalyst to trying to give Fran the development that she needed like 5 episodes ago.
I was looking for an opportunity while we were watching this to yell, "Gene!" And it just never...
It never happened.
It never happened. I was just waiting for it. "No, Gene!"
I wouldn't have gotten it because I didn't know he played Cyclops until you told me just now.
Really?
Yeah.
Surprised you didn't. I mean, granted, the
He had the visors on the whole
the
time.
visor. No, he had sunglasses
Sometimes. I'm a bad Cyclops fan. The
You
bad
are a
one.
bad Cyclops
The
fan.
bad one Cyclops fan.
I know other Cyclops fans. I've gotten in fights with Cyclops fans. And also, okay, so recently, a while ago, I guess this was pre-pandemic, but
Yeah.
at work, we were having some sort of comic book conversation, and I am not a Scott Summers fan.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to bash Cyclops at any opportunity. But there was somebody who, in the conversation, who was also bashing Cyclops, but did not like X-Men, was not an X-Men fan. And I said, "Oh, hold on. You don't get to make fun of Cyclops. He's our idiot."
That's our word.
Yeah, if you're not an X-Men fan, you do not get to partake in this. You need to go away.
I could accept that.
Yeah. Apparently he's in Disenchanted. He's also in the new My Little Pony, which seeing the promo ads for the new My Little Pony just fills me with rage. But we won't get on that. Alright, so Stu's good. Let's move on. Okay, so I feel like we're going from good to bad, good to bad. Nick was definitely one of my favorite characters from the book. This is just...
We were Nick Stans.
Yeah. This was a character they didn't develop at all.
Part of that is also, again, everything goes back to that editing. Like, the first time we see Nick, he comes out and he's wearing the eye patch, and, oh, it's Nick. But if you have not read the book, like, you wouldn't know who that is, or why the eye patch is significant, or why he's even there.
And I know you can't include everything, and obviously, as much time as they spent developing Harold, they were going to have to develop other characters less, and unfortunately that meant Nick was one of those characters.
I would have developed a lot of other characters less before him, but that wasn't my call to make, I guess.
Yeah, and it didn't have anything to do with the performance for me. I thought the performance was okay.
Nah. It's just one of those things. The book almost has it as like a bait and switch, where Nick is almost propped up as the main character for the majority of the book, and then he dies.
Yeah,
and that's supposed to be a big
says,
deal.
I thought Nick was going to lead.
Yeah.
But now it's up to you, Stu Redman.
And that's honestly very biblical-esque.
Right.
But in this one, I'm sitting there going, why do I even care that this character that we barely spend any time with dies?
And that's another big reason why I wanted a third person. I wanted to ask, did you care that Nick died at all?
I almost guarantee you, I bet you we could convince Beck to watch this. And then You'll ask her, "Did you care when Nick died?" And her response is going to be, "Who was Nick? Which one was Nick?" I guarantee you, a person who's not as invested in this universe as we are is going to have that reaction.
You did get a little bit of his relationship with Tom.
I did. I liked how they interacted. I liked this guy as Tom Collin.
Yeah, I did too. And it was good, but I felt like that was almost more important for Tom's character development than it was for Nick's. You don't get, the sheriff. You don't Doc Soames. You don't get Nick being a deputy. His relationship with the sheriff's wife.
And they just try to super rush it by having him take care of the person who put him in the hospital.
And he doesn't
dying.
He doesn't even really take care of him. He just
dabs him a little bit.
Yeah.
I felt like you needed, if you were going to condense his story, that scene still needed to be at least 5 minutes longer.
Yeah.
Like, he needed to be with that guy from the second he woke up. The guy shouldn't have been as far along in Captain Trips. It should have been like a journey.
Yeah, and they also add Tom into that scene as well.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know. But it was a disappointment, but I feel bad criticizing them too much because you just have to make decisions like that. And if it meant not getting the Herald we got, I think it's okay.
Yeah. I mean, I guess. I really kind of thought with as much time and money as they spent that we could have had both.
I mean, so if we're in the editing room, like, do we take a little bit from Fran's time?
Yeah, because he cares about Fran. Yeah, at that point, I would cut my losses with Fran as a character, honestly.
I'm not sure where exactly I would personally cut for time, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I think we just kind of write Nick as an unfortunate casualty of this adaptation.
Yeah.
Tom, let's go to Tom, though. M-O-O-N.
Tom Collins.
Tom Collins.
This guy did a good job as Tom Collins.
Yes.
I did not know how they were going to adapt
Brad William Hinkey.
I did not know how they were going to bring him into the world with our modern sensibilities.
They did a good job.
They did a pretty good job.
He's a little more tame than Bill Fagerbach's performance in the original, but still believable as the character.
I don't know how accurate any of this is. But when I'm watching Tom Collin in the original versus this Tom Collin, the Tom Collin in the original was very much like he was in the book, which reminded me of somebody who has a developmentally delayed kid but doesn't have any resources to take care of him, and they try their best.
Yeah.
This Tom Collin reminded me of somebody who probably had some safety nets and probably had some people help him at least learn to communicate.
Who was raised by millennials with money.
Yeah, that's...
This is what you need to say when you get in this situation.
Yeah.
My name is Tom Cullen. I'm 39 years old. I'm developmentally delayed. I have trouble processing human interaction. Please don't be offended by the way.
And it was robotic, but it was robotic in the ways it had to be.
Yeah.
And that's what the difference I feel between these two adaptations are. Is one is a person that has some issues that didn't have any sort of help, and this one is somebody who had some help. I do feel I like that they didn't hypnotize him as a spy.
I was going to say, I actually think that's an improvement over the book.
I think that's an improvement.
Because they gave him a choice. In the book, they don't give him a choice.
I do think it's weird that everyone was on board with it at first.
Right.
Everyone was on board until they needed Franny to not be on board because she wasn't on board in the book. I'm like, you guys are being schizophrenic. You made your choice. Just change it.
It's like, our 3 people have already voted. I could say no and save my conscience, but no, if we're going to send him, we should send him together.
And she was literally the first one when the name came up to go, yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
Whereas in the book, she's the one who threw a stink about it, rightfully so.
Yeah, and I feel like, honestly, that needed to be in this. But
so, I guess something I like about Fran a lot from the book is she's really a dissenter.
Yeah.
She's very much devil's advocate, dissenting opinion. You're like, why do we need to do this? Why should we do that? Why should we stay in Boulder? Why should we send Tom to Las Vegas? And I felt like...
Yo, mother Abigail, fuck your god.
I feel like we kind of lost that aspect of her in this adaptation.
I don't even think she called... you had that whole killer god line, and I honestly kind of like that.
No, yeah.
Because, especially when you're dealing with, like, religious aspects. it's almost important to have somebody go, if this is God's plan, then it sucks.
Right.
And that was good for her character, but it was missing here.
Okay. And then, kind of wrapping up on Tom, I don't want to jump into our discussions of Las Vegas yet because I really kind of want to save that for when we get to
I was holding it back a little bit.
But I do like what they did with Tom's character in Vegas.
I like what they did with him in Vegas. I don't like how it was necessarily resolved.
Right.
Even though he was hypnotized in the original miniseries and in the book, he came off as much more self-sufficient. Mm-hmm. Like, he knew when he needed to leave. He knew what to do once he left. In this one, and we'll get to it as soon as we get to her, they almost played it like he had to be rescued.
Sort of.
And that bothered me a little bit.
Okay. I have a couple more characters from Boulder I want to go over, and then we'll do Lloyd, and we'll jump into the rest of the Vegas characters. Okay, so Ray Brentner. We've got through it this far without... So in this, one of the big criticisms of The Stand is that it's basically all white people minus Mother Abigail and the White Man and the Rat Man. So they wisely made the decision to change a lot of races and genders and characters in this one. Some
of them worked a lot better than others.
So for instance, Larry was made into a black man.
And
it worked perfectly.
I honestly, all my fan castings have thus far been black people, mostly because I'm like, we should cast somebody who can sing.
Right.
But
Nick was Latino,
and that was fine.
Joe is Asian.
I didn't even notice.
Yeah, I mean that. So for me, a character's race and gender is not as important to the character as their actions and what they say. Mm-hmm. And unless you're doing some sort of historically accurate period drama.
That makes sense.
Yeah, then race shouldn't matter. Like, if we're doing a historically accurate movie about George Washington, he probably shouldn't be played by Whoopi Goldberg. Mm-hmm. But so playing with the race and gender of a character to increase representation so that people can see people who look like them on screen, I think is important. Mm-hmm. And for the most part, I think that's done really well here. So Ralph Brentner is changed to Ray Brentner and is played by a Native American woman. Mm-hmm. I like this and I don't like this. And I'll explain both. And then
I'll let you explain yours first. You go right on ahead.
So my thing about Ralph... Okay, first, kind of overall. Like I said, race and gender doesn't matter that much. You can change them on a character and the character can still feel the same. Larry felt like the same character, his skin was just a different color. With Ralph, they changed his race and gender, and he did feel like a completely different character. I don't feel like Ralph and Ray are the same character at all.
Yeah.
But also, that's not just because they changed the race and gender, it's also because the writing was different. They kind of wrote Ray as like Mother Abigail's
bodyguard or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I feel like it doesn't really matter, and it's not really worth too much discussion because Ralph was not an important character at all, really.
Ralph was one of those characters that I had on my chopping block of, you can either cut them or you can, because the only thing they really do is help Larry's character development in Vegas, and he gets so much that you could almost have him say, I fear no evil with nobody there.
Right.
But at the same time, like, oh yeah, you could change his race. What changing? I'm going to word myself very carefully here. This series, and I don't think it is a far-fetched thing to me to say that this series tried very, very hard to be diverse. It tried its hardest to modernize the setting, the characters. The end result of modernizing Ray was to have them to make an engine joke. about finding fresh water for the white man and then confirming that they know how to do it. So if all you're going to do when you change a character's race is make a stereotypical joke and then reinforce a stereotype, I would much rather you have just not done it. Again, I am a 34-year-old white man, so this is probably not my battle to fight. I'm also of the opinion that if you're not going to do anything with changing a character's race, then you might as well just not do it. And with this, it makes little moments like that stick out to me when you have like a much more diverse cast and it's clear to me that you're trying to be more inclusive, but then you go ahead and just make the racist joke.
Yeah.
And
It was a little awkward.
Granted, they had the Native American make the engine joke.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't even be using that word, but
So,
there you go.
yeah. Something I did like about Ray is when they get to Vegas and when they find Harold,
Mm-hmm.
Ray is sort of the dissenting.
Oh yeah, the fuck him.
Yeah, exactly.
That was fine.
Yeah, and she's also, when they get
Yeah.
to Vegas, like, these are bad people, which gives Glenn the bounce off of they're people, Ray.
Yeah.
They were misled. They're people just like you and me. We may have done the same thing if we ended up in Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
So those discussions she gets to have with Larry and Glenn, I think are great. But yeah, all right. So let's move on to Glenn, and he's our last character in Boulder. I thought Glenn was great, except for his ultimate demise. But before we get to that, just in general, what did you think of Glenn in this one?
I probably didn't like him as much as you. I didn't think he was bad. I just thought he was Glenn.
Mm-hmm.
He was serviceable. In my head and in the book, I think even I pictured him as much older. He was more of a peer to Stu in this. They looked like they were the same age to me.
That was my issue in the original, is even though I liked Glenn in the first miniseries, I did not picture him that old.
Okay, so you were. I thought he looked too young in this, and you thought he looked too old in the first.
So we
one.
need somebody who's halfway between Greg Kinnear and Ray Walston. That's what we need.
Yeah, and like I would have even gone like 50 or 60 would have been fine, but this guy looked like he was in his 30s or 40s,
Mm-hmm.
and to me that's not bad. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just not what I would have cast. It's not what I pictured as the wizened college professor. This guy looked like somebody who just started teaching sociology, as opposed to somebody who's been living and breathing it for 30 years.
Yeah. So I kind of want to use that as a bouncing off point to get into Lloyd in Las Vegas. And before we jump into Lloyd, who is I would have identified as my favorite character going into this. So just a big complaint we had about the original miniseries is they made Las Vegas look like the Biff's Casino from Back to the Future Part 2, where people who go to Las Vegas are bad.
Escape from New York.
Yeah, people who go to Boulder are good. Just this oversimplification. Whereas the book is super nuanced, where there's a lot of good happening in Las Vegas. There's a school, they're cleaning up the city.
And you have some people who are just taking, you won't hear me say this often, freedom too far in Boulder.
Mhm.
Like getting rough and rowdy, not helping with the cleanup.
There are people in Boulder who don't contribute. Everybody in Las Vegas contributes, granted.
Or they get nailed to a...
Granted, it's under duress, but there are good people and there are good things happening in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And my hope for this adaptation was, well, I hope we get to see a more nuanced Las Vegas, like we did in the book. Instead, no, they doubled down and made it worse.
They doubled down. This is just what I was like saying with Ray. When you create something that looks super diverse and super progressive, what's the first thing we noticed whenever we were watching the Vegas scenes? Like, all these people having all this sex are being portrayed as the evil ones.
So
that's not very sex positive.
It's not sex positive. It's not. There's kink shaming in it because
there is kink shaming. Now, granted, they kind of have a throwaway line about like getting pleasure girls and their slaves, but they don't really show that. It just looks like a bunch of people having a good time.
As progressive as it is to change all these other characters' race and gender, they also display all of the bad characters, all the gay characters are bad. A lot of the sex happening in Vegas is between two men or two women. There's no homosexual representation in Boulder. Your three main villains, with Lloyd, Flag, and Trash Can Man, all have homoerotic.
There is clear homoerotic tension. That I don't care what anyone says. They did that on purpose for fan art.
Sure.
They were like, we need to make sure we have something shippable because that's what gets our Twitter clicks.
And we can ship the stand later, that's for sure. But also drug use. People who do drugs are bad, and they're in Las Vegas.
Yeah,
which is not true to the book.
In the book, it was we need this place to be orderly. Mm-hmm. And one of my favorite characters from, and I can't remember his name, but one of my favorite characters from Vegas in the book was the police officer. He's like, well, we don't have any crime here because we go ahead and kill the criminals, which sounds horrible. But when you think about, oh, this person was a cop in the previous world, and he probably saw a bunch of like women in domestic abuse situations or people dying of drug overdoses, and he was probably sick of it. So you got this guy over here promising to get rid of all that. Well, that does sound super tempting, doesn't it? Where in this, it's like, oh, come over here, and I'll just let you fuck whoever you want. You can watch people in the Gladiator Dome, and there's no nuance dies in Las Vegas in every adaptation.
There's no nuance. It's an oversimplification. It makes it seem as though the writers are saying, if you enjoy kinky sex, drugs, or are homosexual, you're a bad person.
Yeah, and I would bet any amount of money that was not their intention.
No, but it just came off that way.
That's the end result, especially when you try so hard to modernize everything else.
And they even had, Dana is a homosexual character in Boulder, but they never showed that at all.
They never showed that at all. The closest they kind of showed it was when she was getting ready to have a three-way.
Yeah.
Which was, you know what, I was like, you know what, she was a sex victim, so maybe they didn't want to show her just getting into a sexual relationship using it as a weapon. Even though, I might have to wave my psychology degree around and go, well, that's kind of something that actually happens.
Right. And that was a big discussion we had when we were talking about book 3, how we felt maybe it's not realistic, but it was a big plus in Dana's. It showed a lot of inner strength for her.
That she could
use it as a weapon.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's stop beating around the bush. Let's get to Lloyd Henry, who was played by Nat Wolff, originally by our hero, the one and only Miguel Ferrer. I'm not even really sure where to start.
They made some choices, and they were all wrong.
So I listened to somebody defend this this interpretation of Lloyd.
Okay.
And I was kind of with him for a minute, and then I just kind of wasn't. So they said that Miguel Ferrer in the original miniseries wasn't very true to the book, and that this adaptation was more true to the book, because if you think about Lloyd in book 1, he's kind of stupid.
Yeah.
And he's not very capable.
It was a good representation of him in book 1.
But, and that's basically what they were saying, is they took that part of Lloyd and carried it through the entire thing, and I'm like, okay, but that's ignoring the fact that aside from the fact that Flag rescued Lloyd, one huge reason why he's so loyal to Flag is because Flag made him think clearer. He made him a leader in this new community.
He gave him something that the world could never have given him. Where it just was like, yeah, just go be how you always were, because that worked out so good the first time.
Yeah, and you don't see any of that. There's
how Vegas functions with the way they portrayed people acting there is beyond me.
So, one of the things that people discuss is that Lloyd is really a front man as Flag's number 2, and a lot of the real power is actually held by other characters. Like, you actually see Julie Lowry and the Rat Woman like doing things and bossing people around and saying take care of this, do that.
Yeah.
And that maybe like behind the scenes they're the ones who are actually running things for Flag, whereas Lloyd is really just kind of the front man.
I mean, if that's the change they wanted to make, that's fine. I will still call it a wrong change.
Yeah. It's not even so much that Lloyd seems to be flamboyantly gay.
And again, trying to be as sensitive as possible, he comes off as a flamboyantly gay stereotype almost.
Yeah, like
And-
with the spinning and the glitter in
Ve-
his face.
Very gaudy. He is constantly trying to bang women,
Mm-hmm.
but that doesn't change how they wrote the character to act. And I ain't saying that there ain't no flamboyantly straight men. I talk with
No.
my hands in everything.
Yeah,
But
you're doing it right now. It's not like I could get on board with saying, okay, we're gonna do Lloyd, but we're gonna make him more flamboyant. But it's that on top of the fact that
they made him useless.
they made him useless, and they also made a trash can and Flag also
They made him uncharacteristically
homoerotic. Yeah,
homoerotic. Lloyd was more evil. Granted, he wasn't a good dude before,
Mhm.
but once he was in Vegas in the book, he was like, well, now I have this school pet projects, and
Mhm.
I'm helping get the military organized. He was helping build a society. He was now the one with the key, which was the whole point.
They also made him a lot weaker than he was in the book.
Yeah.
Where, when he has that confrontation with Glenn in the courtroom, Glenn basically insinuates, you've never killed anybody, have you?
Mm-hmm.
Which, obviously, that's not Lloyd at all in the
Yeah.
book.
Lloyd straight murdered people in the book.
Any one of these things by themselves probably wouldn't have been as
It
damning,
wouldn't have been a deal breaker.
but all of it together.
It was just compiling on.
But I do want to say that the actor himself, Nat Wolff,
Mm-hmm.
he is a great actor. And I felt like, just taking myself out of it and setting all my biases aside and just looking at his performance, I was pretty impressed with him. Because if you would have told me, this is not Lloyd, this is some other character.
They should have had him play the Rat Man.
Yeah. Like, I was laughing a lot when Lloyd was on screen.
Yeah.
Like, the freaking scene where Nadine goes into labor and he like gets her in the wheelchair and he's like running her up to the elevator,
Yeah.
and like all the scenes where he's like apologizing to Flagger. If you didn't want me to kill that hippie, you should have told me. I don't know. There's a lot to process with Lloyd, and I feel like even a year from now I'll still be like, I don't know what to say, how I feel about this, and it's a lot.
Yeah.
So let's talk about our spies really quick. So Dana was a huge high point of the book.
Yeah.
Probably like the high point of book 3.
I really liked Dana in the book.
I like the actress who plays her in this.
I liked their very abridged escape from the zoo scene.
Yeah, the zoo was great, and we'll talk more about that when we get to Scary Park. But the whole zoo thing was great.
She did good at that. She did good whenever she was on. The actress did fine with what she had.
Yeah. The issue is they just made her such a terrible spy.
They made her a very bad spy. And maybe because it's been a while since I was actually reading the book. But they had her going around going, yo, when you got any of them Randall Flags up in here? Can I talk? I need to go talk to some Randall Flags.
Flag did not need magic powers to know she was a spy from Boulder, because she's Lloyd says you're going around, you're asking everybody about Flag. Can I see Flag? When have you seen Flag? And not only that, like the dagger in the back for me was when she knows she's been called to see Flag, she goes to Tom and hands him a note in front of the Rat Woman.
In front of the Rat Woman, in front of everybody, and I'm just like, it hands a note to the guy who can't read.
Yeah. Dana is not that stupid.
Dana, she in the book, it was like she caught a glimpse of him. What did I really
Was
see
that
him?
Tom? Is that really
And then
him?
as soon as she realized, oh, that was Tom, I need to kill myself.
Yeah, she's like, I need to forget about him, and then she realizes that,
And that's
oh, he's going to torture me, so I have to kill myself or I'll give him up.
And-
But she basically gives him up when she goes and hands him that note.
and that's part of what I was talking about with Tom Collin. That scene came across to me as she felt like she had to rescue Tom.
Yeah.
And I was like, Tom didn't need rescuing in the first miniseries or in the book.
If any,
And Dana, as a character, I don't feel would have felt the need to rescue Tom.
no. And if anything, like, that would have been the thing that got him caught,
Yeah.
for sure. But yeah, her actual death was cool. Granted, she didn't do it through the window. She jammed a broken bottle into her throat, but
Yeah.
that part was cool.
That was cool. The only problem I had with that scene was Randall Flagg seemed so nonplussed by the whole
He's
thing.
like, I don't care,
he
whatever.
just, oh well, I didn't get that one.
And then, speaking of nonplussed, so the judge, you really don't get anything with the judge. You don't get any of the judge's relationship with Larry. You don't get to see. You don't even really see the
Like
judge.
you don't know why Larry is recommending the judge.
Yeah.
In the book, you get an idea. Even in the original miniseries, they flipped who recommended the judge.
Yeah.
But at least like they showed that, oh, I've been traveling with them for a while, and I didn't even recognize until I was watching clips of this earlier that the judge was in a car with Larry at one point. Like,
Yeah. When they're riding in
I-
that scene from the trailer, "Welcome to Boulder."
yeah, like I didn't even realize that.
The
I-
only saving grace of the judge for me is you get some of that scene in the motel with the crow at the window.
Yeah, you get some of that. I wish they would have done the full scene.
Yeah.
I feel like cutting the scene short just disappointed me more. There's another character that they changed the sex of, but didn't really affect anything.
Right, because that doesn't really matter. And they even did that in the '94 series. They made the judge black,
Yeah,
which it was
Uh,
great. Didn't change anything.
I only think that I know, like I harp on the fact that it was a woman, and that I noticed the fact that it was a woman because you took this character and then just did nothing with them.
Right.
So
And
now I'm like, well, then why even change it?
if you would have given us like the full scene, like we got in the '94 miniseries of the judge dying, then there would be no real complaint.
Yeah,
But yeah, all right. There's not a lot to say on the judge. So Nadine. So Nadine is probably, aside from Lloyd and Trash, who we'll get to later, probably one of the most controversial characters in this adaptation of The Stand.
played by everyone's favorite actress.
Amber Heard, former wife of Johnny Depp, which maybe I shouldn't be identifying her with Johnny Depp. She's her own woman, and there's more to her than being beat up by Johnny Depp. But unfortunately, those are the two things that draw her together in my brain. But
Not taking a poop on her bed and then telling housekeepers to go clean it up. That's what I think of when I think of Amber Heard.
a lot of the reviews I read said that she was probably one of, if not the weakest performance in the show.
Yeah. Nadine
was not written well. Granted, Nadine is a hard character to write.
Nadine is a hard character. Nadine is another one of those characters that has some nuance to her.
Yeah.
And in this postmodern world, I guess we just don't get any nuance in our
No.
Stand. She was written in this to be almost in love with Flagg.
Yeah.
And like she seemed enamored and turned on by the visions, where before it was like she was left feeling cold, but this was still her destiny, so she had to run to it anyway.
Yeah.
Which was, to me, that's more haunting than I'm in love with the devil.
Yeah. No, I agree. And as great as I thought Larry was in this, his relationship with Nadine is kind of confused.
It's very confused. As good as I think they did with Joe and Larry, I think they did as poorly with Nadine and Larry.
Right. Because you just didn't get a lot of them on screen prior to getting to Boulder.
Yeah.
You had that one scene on the road and then that one scene in the stadium. But really, there's more there with Larry and Joe than with Nadine.
Yeah.
So I think she, like Nick, is kind of one of those characters where she just didn't get enough time devoted to her.
Mm-hmm.
But unlike Nick, she's on screen a lot more, and because of that, she seems worse. Like even her relationship with Harold wasn't as fleshed out as it could have been.
I do like she made out with Harold, and we both looked at each other and were like, "Did he just come in his pants?"
I'm pretty sure that's what happened.
I don't know if that was the intention of that scene, but that is what that's what it looked like.
Yeah,
it looked like a scene out of Big Mouth where he comes in his fucking pants.
Oh, poor Harold. But she did tell him it was okay. She didn't shame him or anything.
Of course, she told him that she needs him.
Yeah. I know.
Every woman who has ever told you it's okay is lying to you.
So what about evil pregnant Nadine? Like the
I had mixed feelings about that. I actually kind of thought that was it was one of those changes that didn't amount to much, but I'm like, oh, that's kind of creepy. That's new. But then they didn't do anything with it.
Exactly. Like they should have owned that a little more.
Yeah, I feel like if you're going to make a change that is big,
go with it.
Yeah. Like
maybe it won't work out, but they kind of did this. Now her mind doesn't break. She doesn't go crazy. Now she's Flag's queen. She's got this makeup on, so she's evil. But then we just kind of double back and do the same ending as in the book.
Yeah, they do give Larry her head.
That was cool.
Yeah,
the teeth freaked me out.
I was like, okay, that's acceptable. That was an acceptable change. That is an acceptable little fuck you to Larry.
Mm-hmm. That was cool. And this sex scene the rape scene with Flag, I thought was a lot more tame.
It was so tame. I get it. You don't want to. Rape is never a great topic.
No.
And it's even worse whenever it's very much written as a natural punishment for her actions.
Yeah.
And that could be very insensitive.
Right. She was predestined to be raped, essentially.
But by an evil, cold demon man.
Yeah.
I still think that you could have found a way to balance the intensity that scene's supposed to have.
Maybe they knew she was going to be a little underwritten, and they felt like making that scene a little more on the tame side was a better decision.
Probably.
Because, I mean, that scene in the book is not so...
Yeah.
It's more understandable because we know Nadine's character and her arc and what she's going through, and so we understand where it's coming from, whereas it might have just been confusing to an audience.
I also think this is one of those like tiny little Daniel nitpicks, but somehow their demon managed to look worse than the 1994.
Yeah.
The 1994 miniseries does not have a lot of good graphics or transformations.
No.
This one managed to be worse.
Yeah, it was...
I was like... And part of that is, like, when you read a book and they are a little bit vague with their description, so it's never going to match what's in your head. But this just looked like a burned victim was fucking her.
He looked like Anakin after Mustafar.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. All right, so then just kind of quickly noting Rita. We did get Rita in this adaptation. She wasn't combined with Nadine's character like in the 94. So this was another thing where, after watching it, we was like, well, it would have been so much better to have Rita and her suicide than it would have been to combine her with Nadine. And now that I've seen Rita, I'm like, I don't know, maybe it was better to combine the two characters.
I think part of it is the sewer scene. That just, for me, that still sticks out of, I was not on Rita's side at almost any point in this. They didn't portray Larry as bad enough of a guy.
A complaint that I had read from other people is that her suicide did not feel earned.
It did not. Yeah, it didn't feel earned at all.
Yeah, like why did she kill herself?
Whereas, like when she walked through the Lincoln Tunnel, or was or abandoned by Larry for the first time.
Yep.
Like the most vile. Like I know a rape gang was chasing her, but we honestly didn't get much of that. And it didn't feel as intense as some of the other shit that I saw in this.
And then we want to touch on Julie and the Rat Woman before we get to our last three big characters to talk about.
Yeah.
I really like Julie Lowry in this. I thought it was a great adaptation of the book character.
Mm-hmm.
The actress who played her like really went all in, and I thought was great. She had one of the best death scenes, just getting ripped apart by lightning.
Yeah, no, I liked it.
And I totally hated her. That scene in the furniture store.
Very.
Oh,
The worst part for me is I have met people like that.
I have met people like that too.
And as anyone who has listened to this podcast can attest, I am not the most PC person. She is horrible.
Yeah. Oh my god.
She is a horrible human being, and she sells being. She makes it.
Mm-hmm.
She sells being that horrible human being that you have met at the Walmart.
Yep, for sure. She was great. And then Ratwoman, like, I still feel like the better choice maybe would have been just to leave out this character
I think you should.
altogether.
I would have. I think they did. They tried, but I would have just cut.
Everything that the Ratwoman did in the story, Julie could have done.
Yeah.
And I just don't get it.
Here's where we cut for time to get more Nick. Is the Ratwoman.
The Ratwoman, exactly. Granted, she's less offensive than the Ratman, but
She's also far less memorable.
yeah, I mean, what's the point?
She didn't talk about no honky voodoo magic.
All right, so moving on to the last of our three characters. Speaking of offensive and memorable, Trash Can Man is a lot like Lloyd, where I'm just kind of perplexed on what to even say.
This is what I will say on the Trash Can Man. I get the feeling that whoever wrote the Trash Can Man only knew that at some point in the book he says "my life for you." It's like how they keep having Mother Abigail say "make your stand."
Mm-hmm.
Like, we get it. I think that was said exactly once in the 1,500-page book.
Yep.
"My life for you," I think, was said 3 times.
Yep.
Maybe it was chanted a little bit towards his end.
Mm-hmm.
This is, again, one of those instances where Daniel's going to go, for a show that was trying so hard to be progressive, you portrayed insanity very insensitively.
Insanity or a mental disability.
Yeah. Whatever they were going for.
Yeah, or both.
He did have problems in the book, and he did say weird stuff in the book.
He was a little deranged because of how he was brought up.
And he had a compulsion, and that compulsion was his fatal flaw. He was very good at finding weapons, but he also had friends in Vegas. He wasn't just some thing. He was even more like Gollum in this than.
So I actually listened to an interview with the showrunner and got a little bit of background on the development of this character.
Mm-hmm.
Per the story, Ezra Miller, aka The Flash, aka one of the villains from Fantastic Beasts, showed up on set with a vision for the Trash Can Man. And what the showrunner said, without, in so many words, he was kind of blaming it on Miller, but saying he was one of the bigger gets they got in terms of an actor.
Well, I mean, he is kind of a big name right now.
He is. And they did not have him on set for a very long time.
Yeah.
He was not available for shooting, which is one of the reasons why he doesn't appear until like episode 6.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, he came in, he said, "This is what I want to do." And they said, "Okay, do it." And that's what happened.
If that's the case, then Ezra Miller should feel ashamed. There's a lot you should feel ashamed of, but I'm going to shame you again on my podcast with all 3 listeners.
3 listeners. Have you watched the video of him choke-slamming that woman?
It was my background on my phone for a while. It's just my screensaver.
So, kind of detouring to Fantastic Beasts for a minute. I know you said you haven't watched them yet.
Yeah.
So they just released the trailer for the 3rd one last week. The 2nd one came out in 2017, 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I have actually, of course, you know the audience, but my daughter's a huge Harry Potter fan.
Yeah.
I've actually been telling her that maybe we should just give up on this movie ever being made. Because, one, obvious J.K. Rowling has been canceled.
Yeah.
Johnny Depp, who was playing Grindelwald, the main villain, has been canceled. And Ezra Miller is on the border of being canceled. He plays the other villain.
People keep trying. They keep coming back.
This movie was just not wanting to ever get made because people are pissed at J.K. Rowling, pissed at Johnny Depp, pissed at Ezra Miller.
They should have Dave Chappelle come into the movie. That's wrong. I'm so sorry.
They did but the movie was made. It's being made. They recast Johnny Depp, so that's cool. Ezra Miller's still in it because he hasn't been completely canceled. Obviously, he's still the Flash. We're still getting a Flash movie. But yeah, he made some choices with the Rat Man. I thought he was going to try to suck Flag's dick. And
I thought they were going to kiss.
Yeah.
The way they framed that shot.
Mm-hmm.
Daniel is not one of those people who reads homoeroticism and everything. I'm not a shipper by any stretch of the imagination. I was watching that scene, and I'm like, somewhere out there is a fangirl that has made that her body pillow.
So, problems with portraying all the bad guys as being homosexual, portraying Trash Can Man as being ableist, as like being like this evil idiot savant who you have this really positive image of a character who's mentally handicapped in Tom Collins, and then you have the exact opposite garbage portrayal of one in...
It's like we were talking about earlier. For every good thing in this adaptation, there's a bad thing.
There's a lot to love, and there's a lot not to love.
Yeah.
All right, let's wrap up characters with a discussion of our two leaders of our two communities, Mother Abigail and Randall Flagg.
I'm a big Randall Flagg guy. I actually like this performance. I liked it so much that one of my friends got me this awesome denim jacket I'm wearing tonight.
Yes.
Wearing my Flagg pins. I'm cosplaying tonight.
Yep, I'm in the studio here with Randall Flagg.
One of the Skarsgårds.
Alexander Skarsgård, not Bill.
Yeah, the sexy one.
I thought he was a little...
I thought he was too attractive.
I thought he was a little tame. I didn't think he was very scary.
In the book, they portray him as very cold and calculated until he loses his temper.
Which we did get to see that with Bobby Terry.
But that was like the one time.
Yeah.
And even that Bobby Terry scene, that confused me because like Bobby Terry flips him off. He leaves the room. He shuts the door. He's going to the elevator. And they wait like 20 whole seconds before he goes, Bobby Terry, you screwed up. That entire sequence was so... I loved it once he got in the elevator and ripped him to pieces.
Ripped him to pieces.
But it was like, everything was in slow motion.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you flip off the dude who everyone has seen float?
I feel like that was supposed to be like our big payoff for waiting for him to be scary for like 6 or 7 episodes. Mm-hmm. And it was like,
I think a character like Randall Flagg is best left in the shadows until you get a face reveal, but you have a name like Skarsgård, you want to put him on there.
Because he's a sexy man.
Like in the book...
How many times did we see his ass?
Not enough. In the book, you have this guy whose face is almost always obscured by shadows in the dreams, and all you can see is the grin. And I know that might not be the most alluring role for an actor who wants to get their face out there.
Right.
But you're a Skarsgård, just let them do that. I don't, that was probably a writer's call. But
yeah. I love the way they handle him in the comic.
The comic, for people who haven't read the comic, if you want an adaptation, like you don't want to spend 1,500 pages, the comic is probably the best.
Yeah, if you want to experience The Stand without reading the book, I would advise reading the comic for sure.
I love the way he looks in the comic. I love the way they do the dreams in the comic.
So how did you feel that Alexander Skarsgård's performance compared to Jamie Sheridan's performance in the original?
I prefer Jamie Sheridan by magnitudes, actually.
I like Jamie Sheridan better too, but I also didn't think he was very scary.
He wasn't very scary, but I feel like he got that that little bit of unhinged aspect to him.
I loved how over the top he went in the last 2 episodes and how almost, I don't want to say comedic it was, but
yeah,
it was he was unsettling.
Yeah.
Like everything, all his interactions with Nadine, all his scenes with Nadine were great. Like the scene with the elevator, the scene where she goes to the ledge, like, I don't know. I think Flagg was one of, he wasn't, it wasn't as disappointing in the same way as like Lloyd and Trash Can Man were.
Yeah, this wasn't offensive to me as a fan of the character.
Right.
Which I don't know how many Randall Flagg fans there are. I got a kick out of them.
Quite a few.
Like, I mean, I literally got a denim jacket just because.
We're going to have to read Dark Tower series or Eyes of the Dragon because there's a lot more Randall Flagg to be had in the kingdom.
Yeah.
In the kingdom, as we're now calling it. Okay, so wrapping up characters with Mother Abigail. Obviously, Whoopi Goldberg is a very iconic actor.
Mm-hmm.
Has been a part of so many things for so long, and she's great, and she's done all these great stuff.
In terms of black actors, she's probably one of the more recognizable.
Right. But this was not like her best performance, and part of that I want to say is the writing. I think they were scared. Okay, so in the original Ruby Dee, she's so stereotyped.
Yeah.
I think they were afraid to use Mother Abigail because they thought they were going to do the same thing and it was going to come off as racist.
The trope of the magical Negro that King almost popularized.
Yeah.
A lot of people are always like, oh, is this, when they see a black person in horror, they're like, oh, is it the one that's going to die first, or is this the magical one? I understand wanting to get away from that.
Yeah.
Get away from it in your own property. I'm sorry. I think Mother Abigail was done dirty in the series. It wasn't until the last episode that she felt like Mother Abigail to me.
She's way too toned down.
She's way too toned.
Not in terms of her speech. They did make her less folksy verbally, which I liked.
Yeah.
But in terms of her engagement in the story with the characters, she's way too scaled back.
This wasn't a person who at 107 was still making their own biscuits.
Yeah.
In fact, I told you this when they find her in a old folks home.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, again, for the upteenth time for the series, trying to be super progressive, taking the strong, independent black woman and locking her away in an old folks home instead of showing how she was self-sufficient and still able to cook and still had her righteous faith in God and all that stuff. That was disappointing to me.
Although I agree with you. One counterpoint, though, if we did get like a multi-season show out of this, I would have liked to seen a bottle episode of Mother Abigail and her experiencing captain trips in the old folks home and like all the people dying around her and how she managed to stay alive as like they're wheeling out people out the back door.
If we could have gotten more, it might have been more forgivable.
Mm-hmm.
But with what we have, that's the feeling I had. Was like, you took this very strong-willed, righteous character and there's still like glimmers of that.
Yeah. Like in the last episode.
But it just did not work for me.
No, and I understand they were afraid of coming off as racist, and that's obviously something they should have addressed, but just in a different way. So she was a little disappointing, but there were moments where she was good, like her conversation with Fran in the last episode.
Yeah,
was cool. Okay, so we're moving on to, our favorite scares. It's something that was more prevalent in the first half of the series. The original, the 94 miniseries was not very scary. Really at all. And this one wasn't super scary either, but it was very gross.
They banked on body horror.
Yeah. The tube necks, all of the use of like saliva and snot and people's skin colors changing and swelling up, that really effective use of rats, like the rat coming out of Larry's mom's mouth, the rat that bites Fran in the last episode, the sewer itself with the poo water.
Yeah, that was great. I remember I physically gagged.
Yeah. Another thing that they did really well was breaking bones. Like every time somebody broke a bone,
every time
cringed.
it looked like a broken bone. It looked like I was sitting there watching like Ridiculousness or some shit.
Harold's death scene, the blood pouring out of his mouth, and his tongue is covered in blood, and it looks like a liver.
Yeah.
That was effective. the vultures pecking off his face.
Yeah.
That was great. And something I didn't occur to me, but he spends all of his time in Boulder putting on a mask for other people, and then when he dies, he loses his face. He loses his mask because the vultures peck it off.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
I didn't pick that up either.
No, I didn't. Somebody smarter than me pointed that out. But yeah, that was cool. Probably the scariest thing in it was the zoo.
If you were going to adapt the zoo and you needed to scale it back for like time and budget, this is the exact way you do it.
And I thought it was perfect. Like it did, making it one guy and just a couple girls opposed to a group of men and a lot of women didn't really make it less scary.
The dude they had for the zoo came off as far more as a Trump stereotype written thing than Randall Flagg ever did to me.
Yeah.
He straight up calls Harold a snowflake.
And another thing that wasn't in the book, but kind of added to the scariness, at least for me as a younger man, was the way that he emasculates Harold.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm not a fighter, but I'd like to think
that you would try harder than Harold did. Harold froze, but he froze very believably.
It is... I would be scared to think that in a situation like that I might freeze up and might be emasculated by this dumb redneck.
That's why I take so much martial arts.
But yeah, that scene was terrifying. Not only for that, but for the obvious reason of a man going around and collecting women and drugging them and tying them up and keeping them in the back of a truck with no AC.
Seeing him be beaten to death was very satisfying. It was
Yeah.
also very gross.
Yeah, it was. And
they didn't skimp on the special effects.
No. And the other girl who was shot, she was Sue Stern.
Okay.
Which was kind of like Lucy, where they just name dropped the character. That they essentially took the character out of the show, but name dropped her anyways, just to get her included in there, which is whatever.
Yeah, that is just whatever.
Kind of where I think this series failed a lot, where the book and the comic succeed really well, is showing how quickly the virus spreads.
I think part of that was hopping back and forth so much.
Part of it was the structure.
Yeah.
Part of it, I'm wondering, like, how much of a conscious decision they made in the editing room because of COVID-19.
Like, how much of it changed because of that. I would be very interested to find out if anything did. Something might have did, but we'll probably... If we find out, it'll be years later. It'll be like when people's NDAs run out, or
exactly,
or somebody will leak something. You figure it might have happened by now, but sometimes those things just randomly drop. Especially like if one of these people gets on a new project,
and they could have like a 10-year non-disclosure agreement too. So
yeah, so it would be interesting to find out if COVID affected the editing or how they portrayed stuff.
And you really don't get any of the vignettes that you do from the book, and the 90s miniseries did some of them. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Also, the scariest thing in the whole thing is Randall Flagg drinking milk. That was absolutely terrifying.
I can't drink milk. Every time I've tried, I throw up. So
yeah, I'm not a milk drinker at all. So generally here we talk about our main criticisms and our least favorite parts. I think we'll kind of save that for our final thoughts.
Yeah.
I think we've made a lot of those pretty clear. Why don't you tell me a little bit about sex in The Stand? How did you feel about how they portrayed Harold and Nadine's relationship, their physical relationship?
I honestly would have liked it to be closer to the book, where you have this very pent-up, sexually frustrated incel-esque character who finally has an outlet for all that. In this, they kind of decided to emasculate him again.
Yeah.
Had him come in his pants. That was funny, but...
It kind of fits the theme where, you know, like, he's worried that when he has to get in a fight, he becomes emasculated because he freezes up in a fight. Same thing happens in sex.
He's a very inadequate person.
Yeah.
And a lot of his behavior is trying to compensate for that.
As an incel, he's like, you know, he tells Fran in the basement, Captain Trips was supposed to be my adventure. This was going to be my story.
I was supposed to be the main character.
And he builds himself up in his head as the main character, but he fails when he has to protect Fran in a fight. He fails when he finally has a chance to have sex with a beautiful woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the sex in this, it's never going to be as, like, explicit as in the book.
No. With Stu and Fran boning after every single meeting.
Yeah, and it's very hard to portray molten pig iron. I really, really want them to find a way to get that point across.
I don't know how you do that on screen. Unless it's some kind of god off. You know how, like, in TV shows when they, like, insinuate in the 90s when they insinuate characters have sex, it would cut to, like, a train running through a tunnel.
Yeah, so I would do something like that.
Where it just shows, like, molten iron being poured into a forge or...
Trying to get it out of her or something, I don't know.
Yeah, we talked a lot about Nadine and Flag's sex scene earlier, or rape scene earlier. I kind of expected more sex, honestly.
I am surprised. With as sexy as some of these characters were... Oh, we did get to see Larry have sex with Rita.
Yeah, we
did. That was nice.
That was nice.
I think that Rita should have been cast about 10 years older.
So, Heather Graham, who played her, is in her 50s.
She does a good job looking younger.
She does not look
I thought
like
she was
she's
like
50.
30.
No. Let me just look up exactly how old she is real quick.
So, I mean, they tried to cast... I guess they did cast the right age. She looks so young.
So she was born in 1970, so she's 51. She does not look it.
All right, if you want an audience to believe that your character is 50, cast someone who's 60, I guess.
Right. But yeah, I felt like we almost got, like... I don't know if we got more sex in the 90s miniseries, but...
Maybe it just felt more impactful.
Yeah, like the scene with Nadine and Harold and the wine, and she's like pulling the wine glass and trying to get him to kiss, and we can do a lot of things, Harold.
It was more sensual.
Yeah.
It was more sensual without nudity, which is weird to me.
So moving to religion, part of a lot of criticisms of the 90 miniseries, it was very tonally very Christian, where in the book it's very nuanced as to, is this the Christian God and the Christian devil, or is this a cosmic good force and a cosmic bad force? And you can kind of read it either way in the book.
I read it as super Christian in the book. I was super surprised.
It's more nuanced in the book as opposed to the 90s miniseries, where I feel like it's almost explicitly Christian.
Yeah.
And I felt like this one should have been... It was more toned down and less explicitly Christian, except for a couple scenes. One where Flag confronts Mother Abigail in the forest, and then also the new coda, the last episode, where literally Flag is basically the snake in the Garden of Eden, and tempts Fran, who's supposed to be Eve, in this like super biblical scene where I felt like that was almost like confirming that yes, he is a Christian demon, and yes, Mother Abigail is an agent of the Christian God. I don't know, maybe I'm not expressing myself super well here, but I expected this to be less toned down or less, explicitly Christian, and I felt like because of those two scenes, I was supposed to interpret it as being Christian. I don't know.
The episode Stephen King actually wrote was the most Christian.
Yeah, I know.
I talked about it at length. I found the book to be almost explicitly pro-Christian, which shocked me for a Stephen King book. Part of that might have been my brief stint of believing I was going to go to seminary school at some point.
I was also... I may have came at it from a different angle too, because I have read Eyes of the Dragon, where Flag is the villain, and that he's not a Christian demon.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know.
I do think it was, for the most part, more toned down on this series.
Right.
The last episode, they made it pretty explicit. They finally brought up the Book of Job,
Yeah.
which I was actually waiting for,
Mhm.
because the Stand is a very... I'm not going to get into a giant theological discussion. It's basically Book of Job, the book.
Yeah.
All this horrible shit happens to all these people who seemingly don't deserve it, and their only answer is, I'm God and you're not.
Yeah, and you know, he uses Mother Abigail as a mouthpiece and says, follow these rules and you'll succeed. You four, go walk, take only the clothes on your back. One of you will fall, and to the point where, you know, even Glenn, the atheist sociologist, is like, we have to follow the rules. We don't know if it's God, but we have to.
When we didn't follow the rules and sent spies, bad stuff happened.
Yeah. So we got to leave Stu in this hole in the ground instead of taking care of him, because that's what Mother Abigail said we had to do.
Yeah.
And it works out that way. So I kind of read Trash Can Man, and I'm sure this wasn't the intent, but I kind of read him as an agent of God in this. Like, because, you know, he was supposed to bring the bomb to the plane, and instead he brings it specifically to Flag in the casino.
Yeah.
And then God kind of, in the book, Whitney stands up to Flag. Flag kills him with electricity, and then that electricity forms the hand of God and explodes the bomb. And that doesn't happen, and God almost kind of or if it is God, takes kind of an offensive stance and attacks Flag.
Yeah, almost just kind of, hey, my hand is here.
Yeah.
Grabs a whole ass building.
I did like that effect.
That looked really cool.
But
it seemed almost even more random, though, like if you're talking about where did this storm come from.
Well, that's why I'm thinking that maybe Trash was involved with God, because God sent him there to have the bomb there. And, you know, one of Trash's last lines is, of course, my life for you. But he's, like, looking up at the ceiling, and you're supposed to think, okay, he's looking up at Flag, who's on the balcony. But what if he's not? What if he's looking up at the sky? What if he's talking to God?
Yeah.
He's saying, God, my life for you. I've brought this bomb here so you can use it to destroy Flag's kingdom.
I think that's something I would be very interested to ask one of the writers about.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's probably not the intention, but
if any of the writers ever hear this and want to do an interview, hit us up.
Yes, for sure. Our socials are at the end. But yeah, I mean, I think we can just kind of our closing thoughts here. For me, there's a lot to love. Specifically, you know, Owen Teague as Harold, just the whole writing, the whole Harold-focused writing. Larry was excellent. Tom was excellent. I like the tone overall, Vegas aside. Big down points for me were Vegas. It's sex, not positive portrayal of people. Didn't like choices made with Lloyd, with Trash Can Man. I don't know. There's a lot of good and a lot of bad.
I'm right there with you. This might be controversial to say, but I almost feel like this made me like the original miniseries more.
Right, and
I
don't think I really didn't walk out of the 90s miniseries thinking it was that great.
Yeah, I feel like it was probably something I would have loved if I would have like watched it all as a kid.
Yeah,
like I did with it. But watching this, I'm like, the original miniseries had so much less time, money, and just episodes, and managed to get more of the stuff that I wanted into it.
Right.
So.
I don't know. It's a mixed bag.
It's not the worst thing I've ever seen. When we do our Stephen King tier list eventually, it'll probably be
somewhere in the middle.
Probably somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Lower middle for me, but
it's not as bad as It Chapter 2 for me.
It's not that bad.
But I'm also less personally invested in The Stand as I am in It.
Yeah. I also think that I'm going to piss a bunch of people off. I objectively think It Chapter 2 is a bad movie. I think you can physically measure its badness.
I watched it again recently, thinking that it was going to be like a Spider-Man 3 thing where every time I watch it, I like it a little more.
You learn to appreciate some of the choices.
But granted, now I've only seen it twice, but that didn't happen. I was still extremely unhappy with it on the second viewing.
I have seen it 3 times. I do not know why. Well, twice was in theaters because I went with you.
Yeah.
And then I went with another group, and then I watched it when it came out on Blu-ray.
I meant to see it again in theaters just because, you know, it's like my favorite horror story of all time, and I never made it there.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even watch it right away when it came out in Blu-ray. I waited until I reread the book over the summer, and then I did what I thought was a really smart thing. I reread the book. I did not rewatch the miniseries. Then I rewatched the 2 movies, thinking, okay, I'm going to watch these movies without having the miniseries fresh in my head. And that did help with Chapter 1. It did not help with Chapter 2 at all.
And the fact that there are still people who very feverishly defended Chapter 2 baffles me.
But a lot of the people that I know who like it, Chapter 2, either have not read the book or have not, or watched the miniseries as an adult and didn't watch it as a kid.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
We're off topic.
Yeah, we're going to cover it in a few months. But So we're almost done with Stand coverage. Next episode, we are going to cover Marvel's The Stand, and we are going to cover the Stephen King short story Night Surf, which is from his first short story collection, Night Shift. Don't get confused there. Which is a spin-off of Captain Trips. It deals with a group of teenagers who do not go to either Boulder or Las Vegas, who stay on the East Coast, and kind of their experiences. So if you don't have access to a copy of Night Shift, you can actually just Google the audiobook on YouTube and listen to it. It's like 20 minutes long. There's no film adaptation of Night Surf, but there are a lot of Dollar Baby, like fan film versions of it, which we may or may not discuss, but we'll discuss the comic adaptation of The Stand and the short story Night Surf itself on our next episode. And then after that, we are done with The Stand. And you know, as great as The Stand is, I tell you, Daniel, I'm ready to be done with it.
I am also ready to be done with The Stand. I'm ready to talk about just about any other horror book or adaptation.
Yeah, and then after that, we're going to be covering 27 Dresses. So rewatch 27 Dresses, because that's what, also starring James Marsden. We're going to cover Dean Koontz's The Phantom. That episode will be releasing, so let me just, okay, so this one will be coming out right after Christmas. So the episode on the comics and Night Surf will be coming out on January 9th. And then our episode covering Dean Koontz's novel Phantoms will come out on January 23rd. So if you're listening to this, you've got about 4 weeks to read Phantoms, which is not super long book.
It's like 500 pages.
Yeah, so
it's like a third of The Stand.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so and then of course after that we're going to be talking about It, which obviously we're both excited to do because we were talking about it on our episode on The Stand.
So we're so sick of The Stand, we're going to talk about it.
So sick of The Stand. I'm ready for it. I'm ready for the Losers Club. But yeah, thank you very much for recording this almost 2-hour episode with me tonight, Daniel.
You're welcome, Ryan.
All right, everybody, stay scary.
Well, that was horrendous. I would tell you boys good job, but the dryness of my sarcasm would likely evaporate all the moisture in both your bodies. Anyway, if you want to hear more of this, please subscribe to their YouTube channel by searching for The Horror of Babylon. You can follow them on Twitter at HorrorPod69. The Facebook page is under The Horror of Babylon. And on Instagram, these fools are The Horror of Babylon, one word. Reach their assuredly empty inbox at thehorrorofbabylonpodcast@gmail.com. You can also request their Discord server link via any other channel. And finally, if you are foolish enough to support this abomination financially, search for The Horror of Babylon on patreon.com. And God save your soul if you do.